But Daniel was already studying the cliff face, his mind racing through possibilities. He had grown up rock climbing in Colorado before the Army, before Afghanistan, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. There's a ledge about 15 feet down. See it? It runs behind that outcropping. If we can reach it, it might connect to the trail on the other side. Morrison looked at him like he'd suggested flying. You want us to climb down a cliff in the dark, in the rain, with wounded soldiers? Daniel was already tying rope to a boulder. I want us to live. Help me set anchors. The descent was a nightmare painted in shades of black and gray. Daniel went first, finding handholds by touch, the rain making every surface slick as ice. He reached the ledge and secured the rope, then called up softly for the first soldier to follow. One by one they came, some scrambling down with practiced ease, others freezing halfway, paralyzed by fear until Daniel talked them through it, his voice calm and steady even as his own heart hammered against his ribs. They lowered the wounded in stretchers, Daniel guiding each one past jagged rocks that could tear flesh or snap rope. Private Chun, still groggy from morphine, looked at Daniel as they lowered him and whispered, "You're crazy. Document. You know that." Daniel managed to smile. "Only when I need to be." Corporal Wong was halfway down when her grip slipped. She slid 5 feet before catching herself, crying out in pain as her injured head struck rock. Daniel was there instantly, one arm steadying her, the other checking her pupils by the glow of his red flashlight. "Stay with me, Wong. You're almost there. 3 more feet. You can do this." She nodded weakly and finished the climb, and Daniel realized he was no longer just treating wounds. He was holding these soldiers together through force of will, each word of encouragement a stitch in the fabric that kept them from unraveling completely. The ledge did connect to the trail, though the passage was so narrow they had to move single file, pressing against wet stone. But they made it. At 3:21 a.m., the last soldier crossed a gap, and they continued climbing, leaving the enemy searching empty darkness below. Daniel felt a moment of fierce pride, quickly followed by exhaustion, so profound he nearly stumbled. Morrison caught his arm. "You did good. Document real good." Daniel shook his head. "We're not home yet." They reached Fire Base Phoenix at 5:38 a.m., just as the sun broke through the clouds, painting the mountains gold and red. The base erupted in controlled chaos as medics rushed forward to take the wounded, as commanders demanded reports, as soldiers reunited with friends they thought dead. Daniel stood apart from it all, watching his battalion file through the gates, counting faces to make sure everyone made it. 247 souls, each one a miracle, each one a weight lifted from his shoulders. Colonel Stevens found him there an hour later, still covered in mud and blood, still watching the gate. "Corporal Cross, I've read the preliminary reports. You took command during the ambush, evacuated casualties under fire, and navigated 247 soldiers through enemy territory using an unmapped route. That's not the job of a medic." Daniel met his eyes steadily. "With respect, sir, saving lives is exactly the job of a medic. I just had to expand my definition." The colonel studied him, then extended his hand. "The Army needs more soldiers who think like you, leaders who understand that rank is just a word, but courage and compassion are everything." Weeks later, when they pinned the silver star to his chest, Daniel thought about that night in the mountains, about the faces of soldiers who trusted him when they had no reason to accept desperation and hope. He had entered the valley as a medic without rank, just another corporal with a medical bag. He had emerged as something else entirely, not because of any title or insignia, but because when a moment demanded it, he had chosen to be the leader his soldiers needed. And in the end, that was the only rank that truly mattered. The rain fell in sheets across the Afghan mountains, turning the narrow valley into a river of mud and stone. Corporal Daniel Cross crouched behind a shattered wall, his medical bag clutched tight against his chest, listening to the thunder of distant artillery that wasn't distant enough. He was 24 years old, trained to save lives, not command soldiers, but tonight everything had changed. The radio in his hand crackled with static and desperate voices, none of them belonging to the officers who should have been giving orders. Those officers were gone now, buried under the rubble of the command post that had taken a direct hit at 11:32 p.m. Just 18 minutes ago. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Medic. We need a medic. The cry came from somewhere in the darkness, and Daniel moved instinctively, his boots splashing through puddles as he ran toward the voice. He found Private Chin pinned beneath a fallen beam, his leg twisted at an angle that made Daniel's stomach turn. Working quickly, Daniel administered morphine and wrapped the leg, all while bullets whined overhead like angry hornets. Chun grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Doc, what do we do?" "The captain's dead. The lieutenant's dead. We're cut off." Daniel met the young soldier's terrified eyes and realized that everyone was looking at him now, a dozen faces emerging from the shadows, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell them they would survive this night. Daniel wasn't a leader. He had joined the army to heal, not to fight, to mend what war broke rather than break it further. But as he looked at these soldiers, some barely older than teenagers, he understood that medical knowledge alone wouldn't save them tonight. He pulled out the crumpled map from his vest, studying it by the dim light of a shielded flashlight. Their battalion had been conducting a routine patrol when the ambush hit, scattering 300 soldiers across 5 miles of hostile territory. The enemy held the main road, their only clear route back to base. The radio provided only fragments of information, other units reporting heavy casualties, requesting air support that couldn't come in this weather. They were alone. "Listen up," Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We're 3 miles from Firebase Phoenix. The main road is suicide, but there's an old smuggler's trail for the eastern ridge." Sergeant Morrison, a veteran with 20 years of service, stepped forward. "That trail's a death trap document. One narrow path, cliffs on both sides. If they're waiting for us up there, we're finished." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right. But they won't be waiting there, because they think we're stupid enough to take the main road. We use the terrain, move silent, and we get our people home." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then turned to the others. "You heard the doc. Grab the wounded. We move in 5. They set out at 12:07 a.m., a column of exhausted soldiers, moving through the rain like ghosts. Daniel walked near the front, stopping every few minutes to check on the wounded being carried on makeshift stretchers. Private Rodriguez had shrapnel in his shoulder, refusing to slow them down despite the blood seeping through his bandages. Corporal Lisa Wong had a concussion, stumbling occasionally but keeping pace. Daniel had stabilized 8 soldiers so far, working by feel in the darkness, his hands remembering what his eyes couldn't see. The medic's oath echoed in his mind. First, do no harm. But tonight, he was doing more than healing. He was making decisions that would either save 247 lives or lead them all into an early grave. The trail narrowed as they climbed, the mountain dropping away into blackness on their left. Daniel could hear the enemy patrols below, their vehicles sweeping the main road with searchlights, hunting for survivors. He had counted on their arrogance, their certainty that the Americans would take the obvious route. But doubt gnawed at him with every step. What if he was wrong? What if there were scouts on this trail? What if the path had been washed out by the storm? He pushed the thoughts away and focused on the soldier in front of him, then the one behind. Each life a weight he carried more surely than his medical bag. At 1:43 a.m., disaster struck. The soldier at the front of the column, Lieutenant Hayes' radio operator, suddenly held up his fist in the signal to stop. Daniel moved forward carefully and saw why. The trail had collapsed, a section of path simply gone, replaced by a 20-foot gap of empty air and a 100-foot drop below. Behind them, the sound of enemy vehicles grew louder. They had maybe 30 minutes before the patrols reached this elevation. Morrison appeared at Daniel's side, his face grim. "We're trapped. We go back, we walk into them. We stay here. They find us at dawn. There's no way across. Document."